Hi and welcome to the Cloaked Hedgehog's YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about West Virginia. And you're going to learn that it's not only Mothman that's made its home there. We're going to hear 4 stories, 2 short ones, 1 medium one, and 1 long spooky one at the end. So let's head off to West Virginia. This encounter comes from Coast to Coast AM. It was transcribed by Jamie Bryan and posted at phantomsandmonsters.com. A caller named Ben called in to tell of his grandfather's run-in with a possible werewolf. Sadly, he never dates the story, but he does claim that it occurred in West Virginia. I have a story. It's a story that my grandfather used to tell us when we were kids. He was in the Korean War and World War II, so he's seen it all. Well, he grew up in West Virginia, and he always told us this story when we were kids, and I always believed it. He and his brother were involved in illegal activities. They were moonshiners. Well, they were crossing the New River one time, and a big black creature was up on 2 legs, and my grandpa always said this, that when he saw it, it stooped down and it ran like feral, like on all 4, and it chased them to the truck. And it ripped the door open and grabbed him by the arm and tore his arm out of its socket. His brother pulled a .357 out and shot the creature off of the truck, and they drove off. His story has never changed. He just passed away about a year ago, and the striking thing is, I took him to go see that new movie, The Wolfman, and in the theater, when it transforms, my grandfather sees the creature up on 2 legs, and then it gets down on all 4s and he chases people. Then he nudged me and said, "Hey Ben, that's exactly what I saw." This report also comes from phantomsandmonsters.com, and it was posted very recently, on July 1st this year. I was driving west on Morgan Run Road near Lubbock Lane in Monongalia County, West Virginia. This is close to Cheat Lake. It happened on June 8th, around 7:30 p.m. I was on my way back to my friend's house. After I drove past Lubbock Lane, I noticed a tall figure move out, then back into the trees. I wasn't driving fast, so I got a good look at it, though it's still hard for me to believe what I saw. It turned back and looked at me. I swear it was a wolf standing on 2 legs. The head was huge with long dark hair. The body was almost like that of a powerful man, but it still had the characteristics of a wolf. I didn't get a good look at the legs, but they were definitely shaped like a wolf's. Very muscular arms with human-like hands and very long fingers or claws. When it looked at me, the eyes seemed to twinkle or shine as the head moved. The face was a wolf's face. Same snout and ears with a thick neck. I believe it had something in the right hand, but the body blocked it from my view. It just looked at me for a few seconds, then took a few steps into the brush. That was all I saw. I haven't talked to anyone about this. This beast looked evil, and I'm not really sure I should have reported this. But it would be interesting if others had reported seeing something like this in the same area. This report was received and written up by Rob Shaw, and it was posted at phantomsandmonsters.com. It's about an unknown bipedal canine sighting in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. This occurred on January 14th, 2014. A couple nights ago, around 11:30 p.m., a local young lady had a very scary sighting of a creature she described as like a werewolf, only scarier. The location is locally known here in Point Pleasant as Cat's Eye on Madison Avenue. 2 nights ago, this young lady was sitting on her front porch, an enclosed patio with a few large windows. One window open in the front, beside the front door, smoking a cigarette. It was after 11 p.m. and visibility was good, up to 100 feet because of the street lights. She said before the sighting she had heard strange noises and the local dogs had been going nuts on and off without an apparent reason. As she was having a smoke, she noticed movement. Thinking it was someone walking down the railroad tracks, she looked up and saw something that blew her mind. It was, in her words, a thing that had a head of a dog, almost exactly like a German shepherd, and was walking like a person on two legs. She said she saw its eyes, and that's when she noticed it was staring at her. She said that she became lost in its eyes. Any other description she cannot recall clearly after seeing it look at her and then seeing its eyes. She did tell me that it was dark colored and almost had the look of wearing an oversized black sweatshirt, meaning it was rather bulky and large in the upper body, but she didn't think it was a sweatshirt, but hair or fur. I asked her to clarify this. She said that's really the only thing she noticed and can remember, other than the head and the description. She said the height was in the neighborhood of 6 feet, maybe just a bit less. She stated several times how the eyes drew her in. She said the creature took a couple of steps toward her, and at that time she saw a flash of light. The creature looked towards the direction it was originally heading, and in a very quick movement, spinned and took off in the direction it came from. The brief flash of light, she soon found out, was her mother's headlights as she turned onto the road. She repeatedly asked her mother if she had seen anything near the railroad tracks when she was near home. She said no, nothing. However, she was not paying much attention because she was late getting in and was tired. What I consider very interesting about this is the government installation located directly across from the witness's home. It has an array of cameras installed over the entire property. It's also patrolled by armed guards. It's too bad we will never be able to see it, but I'm almost certain that this creature was recorded on their cameras. This story comes from WestVirginiaGhosts.com. It's called the Kayawali Wild Thing. My uncle Tony told me this story right before I left for basic training in 2008. In Genoa, West Virginia, in Wayne County, my family owns a small farm. We only have a single cabin on the grounds, and it's used for recreational purposes only. I've grown up hunting there, along with my brother. My grandfather received the land by it being passed down from my great-great-grandfather, who once lived in this extremely rural area. He once had a house there in the early 1900s, but it was lost in a fire. In the late 1990s, my grandfather decided to clean the 70 acres of land and build a cabin to escape from everyone and everything. But even before those days, my family explored the land, hunting and chopping the aged trees for firewood. My uncle Tony and his brother, before he joined the service, used to go camping beyond the area of my family's farm into an area they call the Kayawali. The Kayawali is so rural, the roads cannot be seen on maps, and the road disappears into the creek and heads into the forest near East Lynn Lake. Once, according to my Uncle Tony's account, he, his brother, and his best friend decided to go camping in the Kayawali. They had built a cabin out in the wilderness, which they stayed in when they were hunting in the fall, but they hadn't visited the cabin since the past fall. They had stayed there for a couple of nights when they started noticing sounds of an animal circling the cabin around 1 a.m. every night. My uncle, knowing the sounds of animals, said this creature made a sound he didn't recognize. A deep, slow breathing. He said at first they thought it was possibly a bear, but on the third night, something struck them all three as odd. What happened next, my uncle told me, to this day sends chills up his spine every time he enters the woods. Around 1 a.m., they heard the same animal circling the cabin, but this time it was extremely close. It got closer and closer, and suddenly there was a silence. My uncle, his brother and friend were tense over the situation, needless to say, especially since the animal had stopped directly to the left of the cabin's entrance. In the front of the cabin there was a porch. My uncle waited for 30 minutes, but still there was no sound of movement. After waiting, my uncle was nervous, so he grabbed his gun and loaded it. Just as he loaded the last bullet, the animal stepped on the porch. This got all three men to jump to their feet. What was also peculiar was the fact that it seemed as if the animal walked on 2 feet instead of 4. The creature took a step and another. It stepped until it was directly in front of the door. My uncle then shouted, "If you take one more step, I'll unload my gun on you." There was no sound. They waited for 5 minutes or so, and then, whatever it was, unfortunately it took another step. "I'm going to count to 3, and if you don't identify yourself, I'll shoot you, I promise," my uncle said. No sound, just the wind blowing and the crackle of the fire. After 15 minutes had passed, my uncle decided to move into the next room of the cabin just to be safe. He didn't want to hurt anyone, so he decided to let whomever or whatever have a pass that night. But the creature had other plans. My uncle, his brother and friend decided to just go to sleep in the next room and let the noise be left alone. Just as they went to sleep, the creature awakened them by walking on the porch, which creaked on its every step. The creaking stopped on the porch right in front of the window. My uncle had enough. He gave another warning, the same "don't take another step." But the creature took another step. My uncle unloaded his gun through the window, and he said you could hear the creature take off from the porch. It tore through the woods. He, his brother and friend, in a rush of adrenaline, tore out of the cabin after it. Following a fresh blood trail and using coon lights, they followed the blood trail through the brush and cattail by the lake's edge and then up a mountain. When they reached the top of the mountain, they were surprised to find an old building, possibly a schoolhouse or church, left behind from when the old mining town of East Lynn was booming before they flooded the town and created East Lynn Lake. The blood trail led into a large hole on the side of the building. It was barely daylight now, and they could see just enough to get the boards off the door to get inside the building. What they found was very peculiar and sent a lot of questions through my mind. Towards the back of the building, the boards were torn from the structure, and the dirt from the ground was visible. There was an imprint in the ground, approximately 7 feet long. The imprint, my uncle said, reminded him of what you see when you look at a typical dog house, when a dog digs himself a spot to sleep. An indention in the earth with no grass, and nearly a foot deep. Around this large hole were animal bones piled up. The blood trail was lost. Just as soon as they made this discovery, it began to rain. My uncle, his brother, and friend were terrified. What animal will leave such a huge imprint in the ground? A wild dog? His question would be answered a few years later. After my uncle made this discovery, he and his brother decided they would not stay in the cabin they had built so deep in the woods. Instead, they would stay at my farm, which was approximately 25 minutes away, and it was also closer if something were to happen unexpectedly. 3 years passed since he had the run-in with the creature at the cabin, and my uncle had not experienced any other paranormal activity over the past 3 years. But this year, more unexpected things were going to happen, and a possible explanation for his earlier run-in was just around the corner. My uncle said that while I was hunting, he met the border landowner hunting one day along the fence line. The owner asked my uncle if he had seen anything else on the land, and my uncle said no and asked why. The landowner stated that a few of his horses had been found not only dead, but with their throat from the jawbone to the breastplate had been removed by some type of animal or person. My uncle said he would keep a lookout for anyone during his hunting trip and let him know by the end of his time hunting. A week passed and it was time for my uncle to go home. He packed all of his things up and headed to see the old man who owned the horses to tell him he hadn't seen anything peculiar. He drove to the old man's house, told him, and headed out the gravel road towards Drift. My uncle then said as he passed the old man's horse pasture, he noticed a horse at the fence line which was panicking and letting out a horrible screech. He stopped his jeep and got out. Just then, he said, as soon as he shut the door to his jeep, a creature jumped from the fence line and cleared the road in a single jump. It passed the lights of his jeep, so he got a clear look at its backside. He said it was about 6 feet tall, with sharp claws, and it was hairy with grayish fur. It wasn't human-like, not like a description of Bigfoot, but it was no coyote or other predator either. This creature was on 2 legs. He swears this story is the truth, and I believe him after his service of a lifetime in the armed forces. He said he doesn't have an explanation, but he feels the experience he had at the cabin and the beast he saw clear a 15-foot road are one and the same. He hasn't seen it since, and haven't seen anything of the sort before, but he swears by this story, and it makes you wonder if the story of the Kayawali Wild thing just might be true. That was all I had to offer for West Virginia, but keep tuning in to my channel and you're going to hear other encounters from other states. Subscribe to my channel and comment and like if you want to, and be safe, and I'll see you next time.